About a week before everything exploded, life in our apartment complex was pretty normal. I'm 26 years old, my husband is 32, and we have a 5-year-old daughter who is basically the sunshine of our lives. We live in a ground floor apartment in a mountain area. The layout of our building is a little unusual. There's this breezeway that connects two apartments, ours and our neighbors'. One side is closed off, so only two households share that space, which means if something happens there, there's basically only one other possible culprit. And unfortunately, our neighbors weren't exactly known for being great people. I'm not exaggerating when I say the police were regular visitors to their apartment. Arguments, screaming matches, late-night chaos. At least once every couple of weeks, a patrol car would show up, and sometimes someone would end up in handcuffs. So, yeah, not exactly peaceful neighbors. The first incident. One day, I noticed something weird. Right outside my front door, I had left a small container with car supplies in it. Just some basic stuff. Cleaning supplies, tools, things like that. Nothing crazy. But when I went to grab it later that day, it was gone. Completely gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. Maybe my husband moved it. But after searching everywhere, it became obvious. Someone had stolen it. And the value of everything inside was somewhere between $100 and $200. Not life-changing money, but still frustrating. So I called the police to file a report. When the officer arrived, he asked the standard question, "Do you have any idea who might have taken it?" I hesitated for a moment. I didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. But then I remembered something important. One of our neighbors in the complex happens to be a police officer, and he had cameras pointed toward the entrance of the breezeway. So we checked them. And according to those cameras, no one entered or exited the breezeway during that time, which meant the person who took my stuff had to be someone already inside it, and there was only one other apartment there. So I told the officer the truth. I can't prove it, but the only other people who could have done it are my neighbors. The officer nodded, took the report, and left. But apparently, that small piece of information triggered something much bigger. It turns out that about 2 weeks earlier, something serious had happened involving my neighbors. The boyfriend had been arrested during one of their many domestic disputes, and after that arrest, a protective order had been put in place, meaning he wasn't legally allowed to be there anymore. When the officers responding to my report put two and two together, they realized something. If the boyfriend was still staying in that apartment, he'd be violating the protective order. So they sent a patrol car to check. And sure enough, they caught him there, which meant he was immediately arrested. The war begins. Let's just say our neighbors didn't appreciate that. Even though I hadn't called the cops on him directly, they blamed me anyway. And from that point on, it felt like a cold war started in our hallway. Nothing major at first, just petty things. Whenever I opened my front door, their security system would suddenly start blaring loudly. They'd slam doors, mutter insults. Sometimes they'd yell things through the walls. It was annoying, sure, but I tried to ignore it. I had a daughter to take care of. The last thing I wanted was to get involved in some ridiculous neighbor feud. So, for the most part, I just stayed quiet, went about my life, and hoped it would eventually stop. But then, yesterday
I
happened.
left the apartment in the afternoon to go pick up my daughter from school. Nothing unusual. I was gone for maybe an hour, hour and a half. When we pulled back into the apartment complex, something immediately caught my eye. A police car was parked near the entrance, and standing nearby were my neighbors, specifically the boyfriend. He was standing there with his dogs, talking to the officers. And the second he saw my car pull in, He started pointing at it aggressively, like I was some kind of criminal returning to the scene. My stomach sank. What is going on? I slowly drove closer. One of the officers noticed me and walked toward my car. I rolled down my window. "Hi, is everything okay?" The officer looked at me calmly and said, "Ma'am, can you park your vehicle over there by my partner?" My heart started pounding. I parked where he asked and stepped out of the car. The second officer approached me, and what he said next honestly stunned me. The accusation. He said, "We received a call saying gunshots were heard coming from your apartment. Your neighbor's security camera supposedly recorded it, and they gave us your description." For a moment, I just stared at him. Because the accusation was so ridiculous, my brain almost couldn't process it. Gunshots? From me? I blinked and said the only thing that made sense. "I don't even own a gun." The officer raised an eyebrow. I continued, "And I've been gone for the last hour and a half, picking up my daughter from school." There was a brief pause. The officer looked toward my neighbors, who were watching the entire conversation like they were expecting some huge dramatic arrest. Then he turned back to me. "Why do you think they would say something like that?" And that's when everything clicked. I sighed. "I think it's retaliation for what happened last week." I explained everything: the stolen supplies, the police report, the boyfriend getting arrested for violating the protective order, the petty harassment since then. The officer listened carefully, then nodded slowly and walked back to the other officer. They talked quietly for a few minutes. Meanwhile, my neighbors stood there looking smug, like they were waiting for the moment I'd be placed in handcuffs. But instead, something very different happened. A few minutes later, the officers walked back toward them. Their expressions had completely changed. Serious, professional. The next thing I saw was the officer telling the boyfriend to turn around and place his hands behind his back. And just like that, he was detained. The look on his face was priceless. Total confusion, anger, panic. Meanwhile, animal control arrived and began taking custody of his dogs. Apparently, there were other issues involved that the officers discovered during the investigation, and suddenly, the guy who tried to frame me for gunshots was being put into a police car right in front of everyone. I stood there beside my vehicle trying not to laugh because the irony was just too perfect. They called the police on me. They tried to frame me, and somehow they ended up getting themselves arrested instead. Aftermath. Of course, the drama didn't end there. Now his girlfriend has been going around the apartment complex telling everyone that I got him arrested and that I got their dogs taken away, which is honestly hilarious to me because the funny part is I never called the police that day. They did. They literally brought the cops to their own door. All I did was tell the truth, and apparently that was enough for karma to do the rest. If you enjoyed this story and love hearing about instant karma and revenge gone wrong, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories just like this. And tell me in the comments, what's the most ridiculous neighbor drama you've ever experienced? Trust me, after this story, I'm convinced neighbor feuds can get absolutely insane. And I'll see you in the next one.